No.
It's preparing.
There's Dr. White.
We're on. Looks like it.
Yay.
Okay. Yes, it is 1:02 p.m. and we are now starting our board meeting. Okay, I know you're recording. Don't tell me that. Item number 1, full board call to order. Lynn Kreiner, please.
Thank you. Jessica Quillivan,
Present.
Keith Pardue,
Present.
Sandra Lynn Kreiner, present. Samantha Mixon,
Present.
Michael White, Randy Skaggs,
Here.
Sue Allen,
Here.
Victoria Whitehead,
Present.
Raquel Oliver. Or is it Olivier?
I'm here. It's Olivier.
Olivier. Okay,
Thank
great.
you, ma'am. And White is here. I didn't hear him say.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I'm here.
Okay. All right, we have a full board present. Thank you all. Item 2, consideration and approval of May 13th minutes. Did anyone have any concerns? I didn't note any.
I did not, and I moved to accept them.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And item number 3, Mr. Hellenberg with the executive director's report.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. You received my report yesterday. We'll just go through this briefly. First and foremost, as you heard on the roll call, we have a new board member that was appointed and went through the required training to participate as a member of the board. And so Miss Olivier is joining us today, who is a CPA. And I've included a small bio for her within your material. So we'd like to welcome Miss Olivier onto the board.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you all so very much. I'm kind of doing a duplicate effort here. So as soon as I'm done, I'll get online so that I can actually see me.
Okay, sounds good.
Mike, I don't mean to interrupt, but I didn't get any of your report yesterday.
Okay, we'll follow up. Patricia will send you another copy of it here.
I may have missed it, but I don't remember that either. So
Was it in the updated
It's in the
material?
board materials. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it should have come in your supplemental packet.
Yes. Okay. Maybe.
So when you get that, you'll have the bio for Miss Olivier. Next, we're talking about our data system. As we talked about last time, we pushed a soft launch out. We've hardened that launch up now to include license renewals, new applications, and licensee searches. When we reported in May, we had 150 users on the system. Now we have just over 500 users in the system. So folks are definitely joining and giving us feedback on that. We are experiencing, so texas.gov finally got our approval for our online renewals to happen through the new portal. That launched about a week and a half ago. We've received some successful renewals through the new system, and we've reached out to a couple of those folks that renewed their license to get feedback on how that process went for them and whether or not it was, if there's anything in there that they felt could change. And so we're waiting for feedback from those licensees who just recently renewed. There are some errors coming back on those related to either card declines or processor errors that are sending different codes back to the vendor. So they're having to work to receive those and get those fixed. But we are receiving successful renewals through the new portal. So that's good. We also recently just turned on the license applications online. We had previously been receiving those by mail since I got here to the board. We were receiving those by mail. With COVID, obviously it took a little longer to get those processed, and we got up to our 30 and 45 day marks on processing applications. A lot of that was because of the new system having to scan those documents in and upload them to the new system. In the end state here, the licensees will be able to upload their own documents into the system, which will speed up the process. And so about a week and a half ago, we launched the online applications and we took the paper applications down. So now the only way to submit applications is to submit it through the new system. So we're expecting that to speed up the licensing process as we go forward. We did have an issue. Dr. Kreiner talked to some folks that had an issue with getting their applications in and processed in a timely manner. We were giving some bad information back to folks from our licensing division. So by rule, we have 45 days to process an application. Take that long in a normal working environment. But that became the stock answer that we were giving to folks when they called about, whenever they called, we would tell them, well, it takes 45 days. Well, some of these folks had already been in the system 30 to 40 days when they called. So we gave them a stock answer of 45 days, which obviously gave the impression it was going to take 80 to 90 days to get an application processed. So we made some tweaks on the way that we were responding to folks when they called in. And so applications are running 30 to 45 days right now with this new online process. We're expecting that to come down, so we'll have more over that at the next meeting. We also had a request for some information on our license inspection process. And I asked Mike to be here today to give a quick high-level overview of how we go about our inspections. You'll know that our inspections over the last year have been pretty non-existent. The only inspections that we did were directed inspections, either that they were as a complaint specifically on the practice, or there was a request from an IC or something to do another inspection of the practice. And so our inspections will start up again in September with the new budget. So licensees will start seeing inspections happening more frequently. Mike, are you online to talk a little bit about that and answer any questions that the board may have?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Kind of a quick overview after September 1st, depending on hitting the road again. We'll be looking at high-risk inspections, which are licensees who have not had an inspection in the last 10 years, or they've had a number of complaints filed on them. So we have standardized the inspection process where we use a standard form. We only inspect what we have rules or over the Veterinary Act. And all the inspectors are pretty much on the same page performing these inspections.
And if you recall, the inspection process was a subject of the 2017 Sunset Review. Major changes were made in that in 18 and 19, and then that was one of the areas that received commendations for the work that we did in that out of the last Sunset Review. So that's where we're at on the licensing process, or on the inspection process. Are there any questions over any of those that we've covered so far?
Mike, I had one question. Getting back to the applications for license, when can the new graduates start applying for a license?
So yeah, as soon as they are substantially complete with their classes, they can take the test, which we do provide at Texas A&M for the A&M graduates. Everyone else registers for an online class And so that can happen when they're substantially completed and waiting for their transcripts to be issued and sent to us.
Okay. Thank you.
The other issue that we've been talking a lot about is that of continuing education. We had a meeting with the Texas Veterinary Medical Association over continuing education. That seems to be the number one question that they're receiving is, when is continuing education going to be required again? You have before you today a rule for final adoption talking about acceptable proof of continuing education, which is what was debated last time over online CEs. And we believe that with that passage of that rule today, that will open up the ability to turn continuing education requirements back on. And so in working with the TVMA, we believe that January of 2022 is what we're looking at for CEs to be required for renewals occurring in January of 2022. That's as we sit right now. As we know, COVID numbers are on the rise again. There may be some change to that, but as we sit here today, we're looking at January of 2022 as being the CE requirements for renewals occurring in January of 2022.
So let me ask a question. So, I've got mine already, but for mine renews in January. So that means I have to have all of my 17 by January, even though we haven't had to do it all year round?
Yeah, so it would be any renewal occurring, yes, sir. It would be any renewal occurring in or after January of 2022. So if, and in talking to TVMA about this too, it could be that February is a better date, but we have to start setting a time period for coming back on. Even with that said, we'll give consideration, hardship consideration to those folks who haven't had the ability to do it or find an online provider in the between August and January. And so we'll obviously be sympathetic to those folks who have still had a hardship because of this. But as a whole, with online being available, we believe that January is a good time frame.
Okay, I just think we need to let everybody know that that's going to be expected, because a lot of people now are not getting their CEs because they didn't think they had to, and now we're going to have to cram them all in the last few months.
Yeah, that's
I've done my online.
right. That's good, and we've and like I said, we've been communicating pretty heavily with TVMA about pushing this out to their membership as well. And this was a collaborative effort with them, and so. They're going to check with their, they have a conference coming up. They're going to check with their folks just to make sure that everybody's kind of in agreement that that will work. If we start hearing otherwise, we can push that back a month or two. But we definitely want to start folks into the mindset of we need to get back to continuing education.
There's a lot of active in-person CE going on in our state. I know TIVA has their in-person, that's the equine veterinary group this week. They can get a full more than 17 hours there for horse people. But there's a lot of in-person and online CE in the state currently. So I don't think, it was wise to not get any when we didn't have to get any, but oh well, I think we'll cross those bridges when we come to them.
Yeah, I've been getting asked even from LBTs, and and I'm sure the board will put it on the website, but if it could be posted now that tentatively those renewal Cs will be starting in January, that'll give everybody, I think, a little bit of advance notice.
Yeah. What happened to our?
I don't know, but it made me the host.
It did. I just saw that.
Victoria's like, no.
No. Okay.
Patricia took it back. This is a tennis match. This is like Olympic live stream.
Dr. Sullivan's pulling a Nixon on us.
I didn't do anything. I just said, whoa, where'd that go? Whoa, I'm watching back and forth like the Olympic volleyball. I don't know. Okay, sorry, where are we at? We're still with John. John, are you there?
It looks like we temporarily lost John. I think that's what started the issue.
Okay, I saw him freeze. Give him a minute. I think there's still more of his report.
While we're waiting, Dr. Mixon, do you have a new hairstyle?
It's just pulled back, I think.
I thought you got a haircut or something.
Are you talking about my hair up on top of my head here, Dr. White?
Okay, all right, I feel better now.
I had a long morning. I didn't really have time to do my hair because my phone kept ringing, so I just kind of threw it up.
Look who's talking about hairstyles.
I know. Hello,
Dr. White.
Well, it's not like I have a big choice of what I do with my.
Yours always looks good.
Okay, folks, sorry
Okay.
about that. Yeah,
Sorry.
We lost internet here at the building.
I'd like to call a point of order, no more hair jokes.
Yes, sir.
If I can second that, I will. Here.
You know what? There's a trend.
Okay. John's back. Let's move on with John's report.
I'm back. So that we were finishing up continuing education. Dr. Quillivan was speaking when we lost internet here. So if there was no more discussion on that, moving on to the legislative session, there was a House Bill 3442 that passed related to complaints relating to providing the medical reviews to veterinarians who are subject to complaints appearing before the board. So we're changing processes here in the office to comply with that law. The one thing I would like to mention, and we talked to TVMA about this too, about this bill applies to complaints that were received on or after the effective date. And so this will apply to complaints received on or after September 1. I think there was some thought early on that this would apply to all cases retroactively, but it's actually for September 1 and forward. So that's, I added the language of that in your packet as well. Next, you'll have our financial report. This is as of June. And we're still closing in on our expenditures there. We're actually within 0.5%, although they rounded them up there. So you have that information. Licensing information. We've issued 570 licenses this year. That's up a little bit from what we've done in the past. There was a large graduation across the nation that came to Texas, it looks like. So we saw a spike over the summer in new licenses issued. And then you see our active numbers there. We're about 9,800 veterinarians, 2,100 veterinary technicians, and about 58 equine dental. And there was a new license issued on the equine dental this time as well. Under our enforcement numbers, you'll see our enforcement cases there. One thing to take note of, typically we run about 30 to 40 cases per month coming in. Last month or month before last, we saw about 45 cases. Last month, we saw 56 cases. So we have a pretty steep rise here in complaints coming into the board. Some of these, I think, are attributed to what we believe is a communications breakdown happening between licensees and clients, mainly because of the offices were closed and they weren't able to get face-to-face time with the veterinarians. So that's what we believe that the uptick in cases are, and we'll continue to take a look at those as those cases come in to see if we can find the triggering mechanism for those. But we've been pushing out cases despite the new cases coming in. We cleared out 62 cases last month. And you'll see that on our FY average, and this was as of the end of last month, we cleared almost as many cases out as we brought in, which is an extremely good sign. And kudos to the enforcement division for their work on getting those cases closed. Obviously, our inspections took a hit because of lack of travel. Any questions over those? we're closed out of FY18 cases. We have one FY19 case remaining and one FY20 case remaining. So we're operating primarily in FY21 cases.
Excellent.
Nice.
Then you'll see in legal, which is where, you know, the funnel kind of ends. You'll see in legal, we've got 380 cases sitting in legal. And so quite a few of those cases are sitting in, 120 of those are sitting in ICs. There's a typo on the SOA cases. That's 27 cases, not 227 cases pending.
Phew, I was like, where did those come from?
So yeah, that's a double 2 on there. So it should be only 27 pending SOA. You have 82 pending your action, and then 120 pending ICs. And again, I can't say enough about the board members who continually come in and sit through these ICs and clear 16 or so a month. It is a lot of work, and I do appreciate that. Lastly, on there, you'll see the new licenses issued since our last meeting for both DVMs, EDPs, and LVTs. And pending your questions, that completes my report.
Hey, Mike, how many SOA cases do we typically average?
We've been holding about 27 cases since I got here. During COVID, SOA was only hearing emergency cases. So now statewide, there's a backup in the SOA system and trying to get into SOA. We have looked at contracting an outside counsel to handle our SOA caseload to get some of these cleared up as soon as SOA starts accepting our cases again. Most of our cases, the majority of our cases are cleared through agreed orders in negotiations. But those, though we've hovered right around 27 since I've got here.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hullenberg? We'll move to agenda item 4, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding the proposed rule changes to be published to the Texas Register. Ms. Sharkey.
Right. So the first rule that is included in your packet is the surrender of license rule. It would be a new rule that has previously not been included in our rules and is up for discussion.
I thought we had 10 years and it looks like it's 5 years. Did we discuss changing that? I forget.
My notes from the Rules Committee meeting indicated 5, but we can absolutely change that. And if you all wish to move forward with proposing.
I was under the impression from the Rules Committee hearing that we were not going to adopt this and that we were going to do research into this rule in other states because of the ability or the possibility that this might be abused in the future with license surrender option. That's the notes I have, is that there was going to be research done on other states and other license surrenders if this is something that's active in other states.
That's what I had as well. I think this version definitely gets to where we were all on the same page-ish. But that question did lie, how do other states handle it?
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that AAVSB does not have that information. They would have to conduct a survey of all of their member boards to get me that information.
So I guess the
sorry.
concerns we had, Dr. Skaggs and Dr. White, was that it was very clear, and Dr. Cullen made it very clear that this is not, the license surrender is not a rule that we would impose. The license surrender it would be a rule that the veterinarian could request. And so it was seen more of an act of kindness, or it was seen as a gracious way for maybe somebody who was, it was maybe sort of done practicing anyway, time to retire, and you could surrender your license in lieu of saying, and I understand that side completely. But my concern, and Ms. Whitehead's concern, was that we didn't want this to be expanded upon, and we kind of were worried about even putting this out there as an idea, because my concern is in the future, maybe somebody could really turn this into a weapon or something that it wasn't intended to be used as. So I just wanted to find out how everybody else felt about that.
I would agree with that. I think in the last board meeting, I voiced my concern. And I understand because we have had cases where people surrendered their licenses. As long as, for us ending an investigation or ending an IC. And so I'm not necessarily concerned with the board as it stands now with abusing this. I'm concerned about what happens with future board members. And we don't know, we can't predict that. And so this is one of those unintended consequences kind of rules that I'm concerned about. And I was wondering if we could put this as a sanction or a sanction option as opposed to a rule. Because rules.
It's not
it
something
takes a
I'm
while
ever
to
going to
find
tell
it.
someone to do, though. This is not our job to do this. This is a rule that a licensee can use. We would never say, drop your license in lieu of discipline. I mean, I understand.
You and I won't say that, but that doesn't mean someone 10 years from now. won't.
We're
Right.
already doing this. Why do we need a rule?
That was my question. Yeah.
Because this has happened. We ideally should have a rule for everything we allow to happen, right? But I think this has only happened twice with very senior veterinarians who, did realize that maybe they weren't able to practice as well as they have been in the past, and unblemished records for 70 years and just not wanting to blemish their records. I mean, literally, I was crying on some of these. I'm like, oh, he's been such a great community person in his community, and he's just whatever. But I think, and we have done that, but there's not a rule to provide us grounds for doing that. We just did it because it was the right thing. But this is, I think
So
this.
Brittany, what's the legal perspective on that? Is that accurate? So everything the board does, we should have a rule. So this option should be in a rule as an option for a veterinarian to see in writing.
So exactly. So there are a number of internal processes and options that we do have that don't necessarily need to be in rule that we can adopt through a procedure or process point of view. But for something like this, I think having the rule was an opportunity to provide notice to our licensees that this was an option and make that better known rather than relying on an investigator, board staff, or someone to mention it to them just to make it a more open and transparent process.
Hey, Brittany, is there some way to word in there that, it's exclusively the right of the licensee not to be pushed on by the board? I mean, is there some way to alleviate those concerns? And also, one of the things that I don't really know if would ever happen, but if you get a veterinarian that doesn't want to pay a $2,000 fine and he says, I'm just going to give it up for 5 years and go somewhere else, but he's done something egregious. I mean, is there some way that we can protect ourselves with that, or do we even need to, is my question.
Sure. So at the period of 5 years, they are eligible to reapply for a licensure. It's not necessarily a guarantee that they would be re-awarded that license after that time. So they would likely have to come sit in a board hearing, come to a licensing committee hearing and apply for that license again.
So what if
Dr. Skaggs, this was actually a very serious concern, Lynn and Dr. White and Dr. Skaggs. This was that Mrs. Whitehead actually brought up. And it was a very good point that she brought up. And it was that if somebody surrenders their license in lieu of a massive, let's say there's a horrible situation. So they choose to surrender their license, which means there's no punishment. Can they then just go to another state and then get a license there? And we have no record of the crime or the offense that was committed because they surrendered their license. So that was Mrs. Whitehead's concern, which I thought that was a really important point that I hadn't considered, that you could do something horrible, surrender your license, then Texas has no major record of a punishment. So then what?
We would have record of surrender,
We have
wouldn't,
record of surrender, but
in
no other-
lieu of whatever action. So
But is that all recorded, like in lieu, like, will it state what the complaint was? Will it state what the misconduct was? And then will it state so that the other state calling us saying, why did this person surrender their license? Will that be at our discretion to reveal or not?
Well, I have a concern because that sounds like when someone goes for a job interview and there are limited things that you can say,
Exactly.
like this person is not eligible for rehire versus they were a terrible employee and you shouldn't hire this person. So are we treading on those same fine lines by doing this and then saying, yeah, they surrendered their license so they wouldn't get, the disciplinary action? Are we allowed to tell the other state that, or are we only allowed to say they surrendered their license?
What's the answer to that one? Anyone know?
So we currently provide information to other states, and we report to the decertification database for the ASVB's national database for discipline. And so we very well could report a surrender to the disciplinary board or to the national board as well. And just to follow up on something that Brittany said, AASVB will absolutely poll the states for us. They just, because of the short turnaround of this meeting to our last meeting, they couldn't get a survey out for us in that time period. But we can still ask AASVB to conduct a national survey to get that information. I know the basis of this rule we pulled from other licensing entities here in Texas. But we can absolutely ask AASVB to do the national survey and probably could have it back by the October meeting or the one following that, if you wanted to put this on hold.
I think that's why we also, kind of going back to Dr. Mixon's earlier comments, because is surrender part of the database? What other states allow this? What does that process look like there, so that if Texas is letting people surrender licenses, the other states know and understand what that implication means? And to some extent too, I'll just say, I understand this really kind of the examples we have for this really dive into those veterinarians that are closer to the end of their practice. But the reality is, with the 5 years versus the 10 years discussion we were having was, well, what if I was an LVT, had a rough first marriage, had some problems, got in trouble, and then got out, got to vet school. The turnaround time there could potentially be 5 to 6 years. The reality of 5 years versus 10 and what's appropriate, but I appreciate definitely Brittany bringing in the ability for the board to then have the petition process, for them to come back and put that discretion back with the board, for those cases where it's like, yes, understandably, we as a board think you can practice medicine in Texas and do an amazing job, or we have some concerns, let's put in some probationary type stuff to give us that flexibility. But I think out of all of this, to move forward, I would like to know what other states do.
Brittany, also, and if I may have heard wrong, but I think one of the concerns raised was the board using this as a tool, basically just to strong arm somebody into giving up their license. Is there wording in there that we can incorporate to make sure that they know that's not the intent of this rule in future versions?
We absolutely can. So that, that language isn't in there at present. The way it's drafted is that the onus is on the licensee to surrender their license rather than have it be a disciplinary sanction that's imposed by the board. But we can definitely include some verbiage in that going forward. It sounds like to me that the board is not ready to adopt this yet, especially without some further research. So, when we bring it back, we can definitely include something to address those concerns.
And we'll request AASVB conduct the survey for us.
That would be great. Yeah.
Okay, the second rule. 573.52.
The second rule up for discussion is our edits and amendments to our veterinarian patient record keeping rule. You can see any of the additions are in the rule and underlined.
So just for clarification, I think Dr. Quillivan did a really good job in that she really took this under her wing. And the reason that you see the yellow areas added is because these are areas that we are routinely seeing in ICs where we are asking veterinarians why they didn't note these things that are in yellow. And most of the things that are in yellow, Dr. Quillivan put in to help the veterinarian do a better job of making sure that if an animal, for example, is difficult to examine, make a note of that so if we look at a record and there's no temperature, we don't say, well, that's really poor medicine. If they write could not obtain temperature because cat was too fractious to temp, that gives us the IC, okay, now we know why there's no temp, the animal was too difficult to examine. And the other thing was, one of the things that I think veterinarians need to note in here that's already in our rule, it says very, very clearly, temperature, pulse, respiration, and examination findings are required for diagnosis or treatment, except on a herd, flock, or species, or an individual that's difficult to obtain. And you only have to record those things if they are needed for a diagnosis. So we really have a very good veterinary patient record keeping rule. And the only additions, I think if I'm wrong, Dr. Quillivan, correct me, were made to help the veterinarian write down stuff that would be exculpatory for them when they're making their notes. Am I correct?
Of course. Yep.
So what do you consider an anesthesia record for laying down a horse in the field? I mean, honestly, I don't think that's something that I would do. I haven't done it in the past. For item number 12, to include surgical procedure details, anesthesia records, monitoring and support, and pre and post operative care provided.
I'm not a horse practitioner, so you're the horse practitioner. What would you consider to be an anesthetic record? Downtime and uptime. I know we've discussed that before. At least, the time of how long the horse was on the ground, and drugs. To me, what we see a lot is there's not even dosages of drugs written down. So I think those are important because anesthetic drugs are drugs that can kill us. So
like I always write the drugs down. Everyone I know, everyone I personally know writes drugs down.
Awesome.
But I don't know anybody that when you say anesthetic record, I'm thinking what a lot of the small animal people do, but I know a lot of small animal people don't keep anesthetic records. So I'm curious as what level of detail are you looking for? Just what the PO2 was at the beginning, the average PO2, are you looking for TPR every 5 minutes? What are we?
I'm not going to I don't think our job is to dictate that. Our job is to help clinicians think about paying attention to their patient under anesthesia.
That's a fair point because it doesn't specify what it is. So I think the point is taken is that
it leaves it open to let them know that we expect to know something about if a patient dies under anesthesia, which is where we see a lot of deaths that are unexpected. Unfortunately, not a lot, but that's where we see unexpected things happen, that someone was paying attention. And
right. And I don't disagree. The way it's written, and I don't disagree that people should monitor their animals while they're under anesthesia. I'm just trying to get a basis because I've sat on those cases too. So I know what you're talking about. But I guess I'm looking for what you're looking for anesthetic record. And
well, the problem is we can't do that.
We're not dictating that. We'd have to sell a form and that's not.
But in essence, that's what we're doing by listing this. I think while it was good, intent was good, I feel like we're making the record situation worse with many of the rules were clarified and shortened, yet the record requirements seem to keep getting more increased and more vague. For instance, number 7, it says, all this pulse respiration and all that. Why not just examination findings required for a diagnosis or treatment, except when treating a herd or a flock, so that we don't partially, okay, you'll need it in this case, but you'll need it not need it in this case. So it seems like just a crutch for us to get somebody in trouble, as opposed to giving them a basic guideline as to what they need. And like number 10, it says, why don't we just, I don't know that we need a differential diagnosis plan and after you've made a diagnosis and recorded a treatment, so a lot of that kind of seems repetitive and the next one on sites, injection sites, is that really necessary? So I think these just keep getting longer and longer and longer and more vague, instead of trying to narrow them down and make it to just where you kind of know the basics of what you need. Because when we mention temperature, pulse, and respiration, while we just say, well, it's not needed for every diagnosis except for the ones that we want it to be on there for. So if someone gets called to an IC, we say, okay, we should have had a pulse, temperature, respiration, but you didn't need it for the other ones. So I don't know really where it stops. It seems like it's overwhelming. I think we use those as an avenue and as a crutch to discipline veterinarians. And, we made the comments before about us being a CYA issues, but in my opinion, we're the ones creating the CYA attitude, because we have all these different things that, here's this and this and this, except for this and this, except in that, and except in this case. And so then before long, we've made a group of rules that are not only confusing and hard to follow, but give us extra weapons to get people in trouble when I'm not sure that, that's fair to the veterinarians. And, before I look at any of these rules and vote to accept them, I need to examine my own records, as I wish you guys would too, and look and see if you follow these guidelines on your records, because honestly, I don't. And you can't. It's impossible to do it and practice veterinary medicine. So I just think we're making it worse instead of clarifying it. But that's my opinion.
Dr. White?
Oh, I'm on the fence about this, because I can see how it can be confusing to some. When do you need a TPR? When do you not? And we're going to be the ones that decide whether they needed it or not. And so it's going to be really subjective.
It is very difficult. I mean, the problem is that if we're damned or we're due, if we damned, if we don't. If we don't put in temperature, pulse, respiration, the thing that's difficult is if we don't put it in, then we're damned if we don't put it in as well, because then we haven't been clear. So then we're going to get veterinarians saying, well, why weren't you clearer? So I guess, is there a happy medium somewhere in this? I don't know. This is a tough one.
Right. Like, do I need a TPR for a lameness exam?
No.
Unless we want it.
Unless someone complains and the
okay.
board wants it.
So I'd like to point out a couple of issues. We don't go after veterinarians for their record keeping. Clients complain on their veterinarians, most often due to lack of communication. And we've had this discussion a million times, and we have this discussion with vet students all year long up at the vet school. Complaints usually stem from a lack of communication, but ultimately all we get to see when a complaint comes in are medical records. And we are wasting a lot of IC time when we have incomplete medical records, because then we have to talk to the veterinarian and say, what the heck even happened that day? Because there's no records. It drives me nuts. It is not impossible to do this. It is hard in, I'm sure, a large animal, mixed animal practice, if you don't have the ability to hire a lot of technicians and assistants to help, get medical records in and aren't computerized. I know a lot of, unfortunately, small animal practitioners who are able to do this and keep very good records. And the high majority of our complaints are small animal practitioners. Our rules standard of care has improved over time. We have new techniques, we have quicker, procedures, we have better drugs or different drugs, and standard of care is not the same as it was 50 years ago. These rules need to comply with what I think, again, majority of small animal practitioners, again, we have rural, we understand the differences between city and where there's a bunch of specialists or whatever, but a lot of these rules are derived from cases that we see that we don't have answers for. We don't have answers for what even was given to the patient. I think medical records are important. They tell a story of what's going on with the pet. And people don't have to cover their butts because of us. They have to cover their butts because of society now.
That's true.
It is
But
a
ultimately, we will make
litigious
decisions
society,
on
and we're trying to
care.
help both ends by getting this covered. I suggest we propose the rule and let us get feedback on it.
Well,
I would like to see what this,
we're the ones making the decisions on the cases and penalties. So we, in essence, are the ones making people CYA. And, we go to talking about, well, this is what we're missing on records. But then in the same breath, in a sentence, we change from, well, that's good for small animals, that's not good for large animals. As a veterinarian, how do I know what we're thinking? We've got it on paper that says that I have to have, if I'm castrating a bull out in the country, I've got to have a TPR. If I'm giving him ACE, promazine to settle him down, I've got to have an anesthetic record to watch him forever.
let me play
Not if it's not generally used in castration of a bull, not if the general public of veterinarians
But
don't.
that's not what it says, Dr. Quillifin.
That's how we use.
That's not, it doesn't matter
That's
how
when
we,
we're in IC. You're not in ICs.
well, excuse me, but I've seen a lot of medical review cases and I've seen a lot of ICs that have come from those. And I feel like we sit and browbeat veterinarians for stuff that we wish they'd written in their records, which have no point of being in their records. When I have a tonsillitis case, I look at a tonsillitis, I am not going to have a TPR. He's sick, he's got a sore throat, he's going on antibiotics. I'm not going to take 25 minutes to add insult to injury. So don't act like that we're more pompous than them, because seriously, we're making these decisions on people's livelihood and we're expecting them to follow impossible instructions.
Not impossible.
so just to play devil's advocate, I will say that I personally take a temperature on every horse I touch. And that's only because over the last 25 years, I've discovered that my temperature is my silent indicator of things that I didn't know were brewing. I'll go to do a dental on a horse and the horse looks completely normal, but I always do a TPR and a general physical very quickly in about 2 minutes on every horse before I sedate, because I have found horses with temperatures that shocked me, with a fever that was not apparent. And I just stopped the procedure right then and there and said, I'm sorry, but we can't sedate this horse today because you have a fever that you were unaware of. So I'll come back in 72 hours. We'll do some blood work right now, maybe a CBC chem panel, take a look, maybe run an SAA test, see what we've got going on. And so I think Dr. Quillivan's point about medicine getting better and better is well taken. But at the same time, I have to say that I've been on the board for 3 years and I have yet to see a large animal case in which we didn't use common sense in the large animal case. Unfortunately, the majority of the cases, I'd say actually probably almost 100% of the cases Dr. Quillivan's talking about are small animal, in which they just weren't thorough or they forgot to write it down. And the thing that's difficult for us on the board is that there are a lot of cases that we probably wouldn't even see. Dr. Skaggs, Dr. White, Dr. Kreiner, you guys would probably dismiss a lot more if the veterinarian had written down just a couple more things. And Dr. Quillivan and I say it to a lot of veterinarians in IC is like, if we'd even known what you're telling me in front of us today, you wouldn't be here. And there are not many veterinarians that argue with us. And I see most of them say, you're right. I wasn't thorough enough. I didn't take the time to write that down. And a lot of times Dr. Quilvin and I have dismissed cases out of IC because of this kind of exact discussion. Once we realized that, the veterinarian had changed their protocol and they'd already made good changes in the record. So I think this is a very difficult discussion. I would like to know, like, I read all of the public comments on the CE rule. They were very well written by the 8 or 10 people that wrote public comments. They were excellent. I would like to see what stakeholders would say about this. And because if we get 10 veterinarians that write in and say, this is just overwhelming, then we know, okay, this is overwhelming. So I don't know. I mean, I at some point we do have to move forward on this rule. So I guess Dr. Kreiner and Dr. White, we need your opinion on this as well. About it.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Kreiner, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I don't disagree with anything that you've said because I've sat on the ICs and I read the records. And sometimes the only problem is there wasn't a temperature, and I'm going to just dismiss that because it didn't have anything to do with a case. It may have been an oversight on the veterinarians or the technician. Most of the time, the technicians are the ones that write the temperature down on a particular animal. I was just concerned about overburdening, and it's never a problem until it's a problem. And we see this all the time. I've been in those ICs, so I know what you're talking about. I wanted to bang my head on the table or take the veterinarian and just kind of shake them by the shoulders and say, please put more information in your records. But by that same time, at the same time, I don't want to dictate to them what they need to put in their records. And I think if everyone would just follow what we learned in school and just soap it out to some degree, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Basically we're like, what you learned in first or second year about writing soaps is enough to keep you out of trouble. And then I can't get this information because I don't want to get kicked in the knees, or I don't want to get kicked in the head, or I don't want to get bitten by whatever it is I'm working on is enough. But I just wanted to be devil's advocate and be cautious about the amount of detail and what a particular record looks like for particular animals. So if, as an example, since most of these cases are related to small animal, you compare one clinic that has someone dedicated to doing an anesthesia record and it's gorgeous versus a solo with a receptionist and a technician and the dog's put on the table and you may or may not have the pulse ox going depending on what equipment they have, and they don't keep an anesthetic record. So we've seen a lot that don't have them. So what are we looking for there? And I know it's our discretion, or I shouldn't say our, it's the board's discretion when it shows up as being an issue. But, I feel like at some point we need to tell them, what is the minimum for this? Was it the TPR before you started surgery or the TPR at the end of surgery, as opposed to having every 5 to 10 minutes, information, the pulse ox, the blood pressure, the whatever. And I guess it's in a case by case basis, but we're dealing with a lot of people that, still are practicing, medicine. And it's not bad medicine, it's just older medicine. And it's not that they want to practice in a certain way, it's what they can afford within that client base that they have in that community that they're in. And that's my concern.
Dr. White?
Yeah, I see both sides of this, and I think it's a difficult subject to talk about. I'm not opposed to pushing it out there and getting comments because I think we're going to get pushback. And I'd like to see what the community thinks, because I agree with Dr. Skaggs as well. I mean, there are some people who don't have the ability to document all this on at the moment. With that said, I wish that we could mandate the way that records are submitted. Because
Yes.
sometimes it is so difficult to go through a medical record and make sense of what's in there. But some of these, I know I'm getting off track here, but some of these computer generated records that we get, there's stuff all over the place, and it's so hard to make sense of it sometimes. Okay, I'll stop. But yeah, I think that we should move forward with getting comments.
I want to make one point, Brittany, and I'm sorry I didn't catch it on this record, but I'm pretty sure, based on Dr. Kreiner's recommendation when we had the committee meeting, that we wanted to, when it says identification of patient, to go along with the other rules we're about to bring up, we wanted it to say identification of patient, herd, flock, or other collective term. We wanted to kind of start putting that everywhere so that it was just clear that it was allowed to be a patient, herd, flock, or, do y'all remember that? Was that?
Or
I thought that was
population.
in the labeling rule, Dr. Quillivan.
I know, but we changed it on the labeling, and then we also needed to change it on,
Basically, Dr. Quillivan wants it to be consistent. She wants to, if we're going to change on the labeling rule, what she wants to do is also have that same sentence under number 2, so that identification of patient / herd / flock / other collective term, so that the large animal veterinarians know as soon as they get to number 2 that they don't have to identify each patient. They can identify the herd, Mr. Smith's Brahma herd or Mrs. Yeah.
which I'm sure they're already doing, I guess.
Yes,
I didn't know. Lynn brought it up because it's in something, and then wasn't on labeling of medications. And then I thought as a group, we talked about, we needed that pretty much everywhere that it says patient, we needed to say patient, herd, flock, blah, blah, blah. But
Right. Lynn found it in number 7. So that's where she found it in number 7, was treating a herd, flock, or species, blah, blah. And so that it's actually it's a nice phrase because it covers
okay,
all your types.
okay.
One
All
more
right.
question though. On number 10, it says differential diagnosis and or treatment plan if applicable. What does that mean?
That means what's wrong with the pet and
Shouldn't that be up here? That should be up here in records required for diagnosis, right? I mean, number 7 and number 10 are duplicates of each other.
Maybe what Dr. Skaggs is what we should do is the rule is weighty. Maybe we need to literally pick through each of these numbers and try and combine several of them. It is a little overwhelming the way it's presented. I like bullet points much better than paragraphs, but I probably can't win that argument. But maybe
Really, technically number 9 should be in number 7 as well as number 8. But if you're talking about, the examination findings, that should all be in number 7. And so there's 3 of them. And then in number 11, dosage and concentration to me are the same. I don't understand the difference between doses and concentrations of medicines.
What if you just, like statutorily structuring it, kind of what Dr. Skaggs is saying, have that one word, 2 or 1 sentence, and then this includes, but is not limited to, per the situation, and then list those types of things. Maybe, my fear there would be a future board saying, well, you didn't do this, and it's in our rules that you probably should, to have discretion within that list, but to say includes but not limited to, provide the examples, I guess.
Yeah, you could do that. We could combine these to say the examination can include and is not limited to this list of things. You could do that as well.
that sounds more legalese to me. I'm not sure I want, is not limited to, is limited. I don't know. That seems, I don't know what that means. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what.
Or you could just say examples
None of this is limited to anything. It all depends on the case, really, right? What we're seeing, what happened.
Examples of this include. And part of that is maybe just this question of, I think we talked about it in our rules subcommittee was, do we need to have a couple CEs educating on ICs and what it looks like, what we're seeing, how do we make those decisions, that kind of stuff. Because I think to some extent, I see the side that we're on where we're saying, if we only had it, we wouldn't be this far in the process. But I also am very sympathetic to Dr. Skaggs's opinions on this, and it's very weighted. It's a very heavy rule. And we're trying to encompass everything in one big state and in one simple rule. So I'd like to hear what other vets in the region think about it.
Can we, I know this sounds weird, this is all procedural, Brittany, but can you publish it, get comments, and then can we go back and mush it around again?
Absolutely. And so generally what happens a lot of times when we publish these rules, if we do get a lot of public commentary, the board then can, if it's a simple tweak or one word or, something like that, we can alter the rule slightly and then still move to adopt it. But if there are significant changes the board wants to make after receiving that public comment, we can kind of come back to the drawing board, retool the rule, and then repost it and start that process over again.
Okay.
Now, I know that we've had rule changes in the past where we didn't just get public comment, but the public also gave their 2 cents on how it should read. So could we put that in as a request to, not just a public comment, I think it's good, I think it's bad, don't change anything, but maybe get them or put a statement in there to encourage them to really look at the rule and see how they would like the rule to read for themselves.
Most people do comment already. Like if you look at all the people who commented on our CE, a lot of them said, because I'm a single mother and because, it's also less expensive. Sometimes free stuff is online for education. So out of the 7 or 8 comments, 7 of them gave a reason why. So I don't know that we need to include that. I also want to point out that only the underlined sections on this are partial or changes to the rule. So this whole big, huge, long rule has literally 4 edits to it. So,
Can I ask
One question, if you mind, I'll get off my soapbox. But my question is on number 17. Is there only one DVM license in the state of Texas?
We issue a special and a temporary, military special, temporary, and a regular DVM.
But no specialist license.
No.
So then 17 is really kind of irrelevant as well. If every veterinarian in the state has the same degree of license, that does create a lot of problems for veterinarians in my area when that talks about specialists and referrals and need to refer with not anybody being around here. So not sure that, in my view, that it makes any difference whether you talk to someone who claims to be a specialist, but there's not any differentiating in their license as to whether they're a specialist or not. So that's just a food for thought.
Or we could define specialist because we consider a specialist someone who has an advanced training.
They have to have a board certification.
Right. And so, I mean, we should all know that that's what a specialist is, but I mean, I don't think it would take but half a sentence to say they have to be board certified in their field to be considered a specialist.
And I don't have the rules in front of me, but I think it is defined elsewhere in the act.
People in my area are concerned that we all have the same degree, but yet they feel like if we don't offer a trip to another specialist in Houston, then we're going to get a license problem and get reprimanded. So that's my only point in that conversation.
Can I ask one question? That back on number 7 and some of the other descriptions, I'm involved in shelter medicine, we have what we consider a herd, but the board does not allow dogs and cats to be called a herd, and they're not a flock. So shouldn't we have something in here to indicate a population or something that
Well,
have that?
that's what this way this works is this. If unfortunately, again, to Dr. Skaggs' point, this rule goes on forever. So if you look at way on the back here under section C, it says when appropriate, veterinarians may substitute the words herd, flock, or other collective term in place of the word patient in all subsections A and B. So right there in section C, you basically can take out the word patient and use population for your purposes for dogs or cat. We can use herd and flock. We can use other collective term in any parts of A and B that we need to. So unfortunately, here's the truth. Unfortunately, the reason this rule is so long is it's been developed over all of the decades that we've had boards with improving medicine and issues. And all of the things added into here have been added from other boards who felt there was a need for that situation. So it's a very heavy rule.
If C takes care of all that, then why are we listing all those things in 7?
I don't.
Just say patient and then go down to the bottom and say, okay, well, you can substitute whatever you want for the word patient.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know, because I don't know who wrote this all those years ago.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know if that's illegal. I don't know if that's a legal thing. It's written in a legal manner or, because the lawyers write this. We just put our ideas out there.
Are there any other new major thoughts regarding this rule, or shall we motion and decide what we're doing? Anyone new, major concerns, thoughts? Lynn, you were about to say something.
No, I don't. I was, but I don't think it's appropriate for this. So we're going to skip it.
Okay.
All right. So what are the different motions?
It's either motion to post and we vote on it and go from there.
To post it or propose it?
Publish it in the Texas Register.
Okay.
And get feedback on it.
I move that we publish in the Texas Register and get feedback for the next board meeting.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Is anyone counting? I feel like I heard more ayes than nays, but I didn't. This is hard when it's not hands raised in a meeting.
We can raise our hand.
I see.
So we have Skaggs as a no and the rest as a yes. So if that needs to change, then we'll just need to know.
Well, it sounds like we'll then publish it and get feedback on it. And we'll move on to item number C in number 4.
The next rule up for discussion is Rule 573.40, which is the labeling of medications dispensed. And this was the change where that was discussed earlier to Section 3 that also adds in the words herd, flock, or other collective term to patient to make it clear for large animal practitioners.
And shelters.
And shelters. And shelters.
There you go, Dr. White.
Just out of curiosity, Dr. White, would you call it a kennel for the dogs, and what do you call the cats in a group?
Oh, don't put me on the spot, Dr. Crowner. We just call them the population.
The dog population and the cat population. I can live with that.
Can I entertain a motion?
I move that we publish this in the Register for comment.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. And item number D, duty to cooperate with the board amended.
So the final rule for consideration for proposal and publishing to the Texas Register is Rule 573.75, which is duty to cooperate with the board. You can see there are some, it's an amendment to an existing rule, so you can see there's some additions and some subtractions in this rule.
Can I ask, should that say 14 business days? Instead of just 14 days? Or does that matter?
Well, then you get into a lot of different. because
That's true, that's true.
For here, every day of the week is a business day for me.
Oh, Dr. White.
Well, it is. We're open 7 days a week.
Yeah, veterinary medicine is a 7-day-a-week job. That's very true.
The,
Motion, or is there discussion?
I'd like to just bring something up real fast. And after marinating on this for a while, I kind of would like to add a sentence to this that covers the situation of, well, I just discovered a record, but I didn't submit it. So like a duty for a veterinarian to deliver the records if they forgot it, but give them a duty that it needs to be submitted timely. If that makes, Brittany can lawyer that for me. But I just thought of the situation, like you're not going to get in trouble, but you have a duty to give it to us as soon as possible. So that we're not going into an IC or something and have something a day before, you know, because I think we've seen that a little bit when they work, particularly with lawyers. We get like supplemental packets and stuff.
Yeah, and I personally do not, I mean, I'm sorry, but if any lawyer who is being paid to represent a veterinarian thinks they are helping their client by doing that, they are hurting them immensely. I do not have the time. I'm going to state that right now. I do not have the time, nor the wherewithal or the interest in reading last minute supplementals from lawyers. If you want to represent your veterinarian to the best of your ability, it needs to be given to us with enough time that I can really look at the case properly and then understand the defense. So submitting something to me at the day of the IC, you just shot your client in the foot.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, I mean, that needs to be said. This has happened way too many times in the last
Yeah,
year.
it's very difficult. I'll entertain a motion to propose.
Second.
I need a first. I'm not motioning.
Oh,
I'll
fine.
entertain.
Okay, I'll move. I move to publish this in the Register
As amended by Ms. Whitehead.
as amended by Ms.
Well,
Whitehead. Thank you.
Wait a minute, what are we
No.
amending here? Because I don't agree with that.
Yeah, no, I don't think we want the amendment. If we get some public comment regarding that, that's fine, but. I think
Right.
Dr.
I threw that out there to get some idea about what you guys think about it too. I
No,
wasn't necessarily proposing it for an amendment, but it was something that I was thinking of while reading it. the
Well,
past couple-
okay,
It's
so
fine.
I'll give a quick example and then we can go from there. I was reading a case and there was information that was missing and I had to call to request that information. And it took me 2 weeks to get my hands on it and another week to be able to actually open it and use it for the case. And that was really frustrating. And I think if I hadn't have done that and it would have gone to IC, then people in IC would have been really unhappy with, you know, either not having the information or not being able to access it once it was provided. So in that situation, unfortunately, the veterinarian didn't have access to the information because he was no longer there. And so they had to depend on the facility to provide all the information. So.
Right, and that's during the initial medical review, I think is what you're saying. So,
that was during the process of collecting the information.
right,
That it was found that even though the veterinarian had asked the information to be sent, the facility that he no longer worked at had not sent everything. And that information was really important in the case. And so that's my concern. That is my only real concern, is the veterinarian getting in trouble when they've asked and requested information to be sent, but does not know that all the information hasn't been sent by the facility when they're no longer employed either as an associate or relief vet or whatever at that facility.
Right, and that's what item B covers, that the licensee is unable for good cause, and that means someone else is gonna have a problem.
Right.
Right, so that's covered there.
Okay, so that was my only issue. And so, other than that,
Well, I'd like to move that we propose this for comment as written.
Like the point of order, though, don't we have an amendment that has been proposed that we need to evaluate? And furthermore, just a little bit more of discussion. Again, we're talking about informal conferences, but this really almost exclusively goes back to medical reviews, getting the records in and getting them evaluated the first time. So informal conferences are kind of a moot point. But Ms. Whitehead did have an amendment that she was offering, and I'd like to hear her amendment so we could decide whether we want to second it.
And I didn't mean to formally offer it as an amendment. I wanted to offer it for discussion consideration, but just sort of a kind of a safety for a veterinarian if they don't comply with the 14 days, or if they do comply with the 14 days, but then something pops up, they found another record or their company released more documents to them, that they know they have a duty to get that to us expeditiously, to not just like let it hang out, if that makes sense. So like if I'm in court and something pops up, I have a duty to get that to the process in an expedient manner. So, but if that's not an issue that you guys see, then I don't offer it as an amendment.
Well, if she is offering that as an amendment, I would like to second it. But totally up to her.
I think it's just kind of a second tier. Like you got to get it within 14 days. If you don't and you find something, you're totally okay, but just get it to us expeditiously.
Well, isn't that covered by B?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you would, in an IC, you would take into account any mitigating circumstances.
of course.
I don't know why we need to have something specifically spelled out that, okay, if you find it, then you have to turn it in a certain period of time. It already says you have 14 days.
I kind of thought B covered all of that as well. Because
Yeah.
I think Dr. Kreiner and I discussed this a long time back, and we had this discussion, we went round and around. I'm like, if email or a phone call or something that says, hey, I can't meet it by this date, but if you can give me another 7 days, I got it. And we have that in writing. Doesn't
So the difference between what I'm talking about
Yeah,
versus
she's talking
B
about something later, which
is like, you've already complied with this rule. You've met your 14 days,
okay.
but then you discover more information, like just knowing you got a duty to give that to us as soon as possible.
so are you
Okay,
proposing an amendment, or is someone proposing an amendment to the rule so that we can post it?
So I have one more question to ask in here. In this duty, I know that we've got paperwork that requires the veterinarian to sign it stating that they have given all that information to the board, and kind of holds them liable if more information surfaces that wasn't initially part of the package that they sent in and they've now signed off on. So what I'm concerned is that kind of what you're talking about,
I
Victoria?
think that, if in Brittany's opinion, just that document that they signed could just somewhat state that versus putting it in a rule, I think that would definitely cover it.
So then we wouldn't need to make that addition in the rule. We would just maybe make a change to the document that they would sign in good faith.
Yeah, we could absolutely handle that procedurally on the forms for licensees.
Okay, then
Okay.
I'm good with the way the rule is written, and I'll move to have the rule posted in the register for comment.
So we're currently sitting on Dr. White's same
Move.
motion.
sorry.
Dr. White has the motion. We're looking for a second.
Then I'll second it.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. I think we are moving on to item number 5, discussion, recommendation, and possible action regarding adoption of rule changes to be published. No, this is from the previous Texas Register, right?
Right. So these are to adopt rules that have already been published in the Texas Register. So this is for final adoption.
Okay. And we did get, well, let's start with, go ahead, Brittany, sorry. Start with temporary veterinary license.
So the first rule for possible adoption is Rule 571.15, which is a temporary veterinary license. This rule would allow the temporary veterinary license restriction on dates to not run consecutively to better facilitate folks coming in for temporary projects.
Did we get a comment on this? I didn't see any. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll
make the
second.
mo- Oh, who made it?
Dr. Q?
No, I can't, I don't motion. I'm entertaining a
Oh,
motion.
you're entertaining a motion.
Someone to move.
Then I will move that we accept this rule as written.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Brittany?
All right. The next rule up for possible adoption is Rule 573.27, which is honesty, integrity, and fair dealing. Licensee, this would just eliminate the specific back half of the rule to make the rule more generally and broadly applicable.
I move that we adopt that rule as is, as written.
Second?
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
And the final rule up for adoption is Rule 573.65, which is proof of acceptable continuing education. This would take out the requirement or limitation on how many hours can be acquired at virtually or online versus at in-person events for all of our classes of licensees.
You did-
excellent. And I would want to commend though, I'd like to note, I would like to commend the veterinarians that took the time to write the letters for the public comment, because we don't get a lot of stakeholder input unless, there's a major issue, and these doctors all did a great job. And I just wanted to tell the doctors that were opposed to straight online CE that I read your comments. I understood exactly what you were saying. And I agree. I personally like in-person CE as well, but I think that the majority of people now need an online option. So I just wanted to say thank you to the stakeholders that made the public comments, because they were great letters.
And there's still going to be in-person CE that you can attend. I just went to a local meeting last week, so there's still in-person, and getting together with colleagues is available as well still, so.
Okay.
I think there was one that was thinking that we were eliminating that, and that wasn't the case. I'm heading to CE tomorrow, so I get in person, and I hope everyone else continues to do that if that's what they want to do. But
Can I have a motion?
I will move to accept this rule as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, discussion regarding alternative therapies rule. Dr. Mixon, please.
All right, so the alternative therapies rule, basically what I would like is I would like the veterinarians on the board, and anyone else, frankly, if you've run across alternative therapies offered to your pet, as a non-veterinarian on the board. I really need some input on what alternative therapies people are running across. Any issues you're having with them. We need to redo that rule. We tried 3 years ago when I first came on. We may even change the name of it to say complementary therapies. Times have changed. Sometimes they're not alternative, sometimes they're complementary to Western medicine. So I want to bring this up for discussion and get input from everybody so that we can, I would like to have this rule discussed in our rules committee between now and the next board meeting, basically.
We can add
I'll
it to the
jump on that
committee.
bandwagon.
Yeah.
Dr. Mixon, would this include chiropractic therapy
Yes.
on horses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've had some veterinarians in my area reach out to me on chiropractic medicine for horses.
Yep.
So yes, I'd like to add that, please.
Please, yes, I would
Yeah.
like that because there's a bunch of therapies out there and there are some that we're not even aware of. So I really need to, I really need every veterinarian on the board and non-veterinarians to send a list of all the alternative therapies they're seeing, they're witnessing, they're running across problems that clients are having. If I know of someone in Houston that was injecting essential oils into horses to treat cancer, and that's just so off the scope of what's legal with that kind of stuff. So I need to know what's out there so we can work on this rule.
I will be happy to give you a list. I run across it all the time. I myself do both chiropractic and acupuncture.
Excellent. Thank you.
We're looking for feedback from other board members if they have any, maybe sending to Brittany for the rules committee. And we don't need a motion, I believe, to just take this to rules committee. Is that correct, Brittany? Hello.
Dr. Mixon, would this potentially change some of these to more of a complementary therapy? Because there is more integration with like chiropractic and stuff.
That was one of the big discussions 3 years ago when we had John and Michelle had formed a sort of a committee, and I just listened to the input. It involved some veterinarians. And that was one of the big issues that people brought up, was that alternative therapies is an outdated term, even in human medicine. It's an outdated term for things like chiropractic work and acupuncture and all kinds of therapies is now seen more as complementary. And so we'll go ahead and look at even changing the term.
Yeah, it is more multimodal therapies, I think. now.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll look to see that in rules committee, hopefully, and get some feedback from others. Agenda item 7, discussion regarding the handling of complaints for practices that utilize the term nurse in staff descriptions. Miss Allen.
Thank you. I'd like to just spend a minute touching on the definitions of the titles that are identified by the board for those members that may not be aware. And according to the Texas Veterinary Licensing Act in section 801.002, a licensed vet tech is defined. They are recognized. And then we have that person is licensed as a veterinary technician by the state board. Then we have veterinary assistant, which is a person who's employed by a licensed veterinarian, performs tasks related to animal care, but then is not a certified vet assistant or a licensed vet tech. And then lastly, there's a third assigned title that's recognized by both this board and the TVMA, which is certified vet assistant. Another term that I've seen out there, it's been a national discussion, but we're seeing it used for some of the staff, is that a veterinary nurse? And for those that may or may not be aware, in recent years, the National Association of Veterinary Technicians began to pursue, in part, this pursuit was whether or not both credentialed technicians and the public felt the nomenclature veterinary nurse might be more appropriate than veterinary technician. It is a given. I think most of us obviously readily recognize and understand what that term means in human medicine. Speaking for myself, I felt that the pursuit of that was going to sidetrack what we as credentialed technicians were. And based on some of the commentary around that amongst paraprofessionals. I think there was a perception it was going to create or perceived as a fix for the issues we struggle with in our profession, including lack of recognition, proper job utilization, lack of advancement, pay, turnover, etc. That isn't the cure of what ails this profession. What is needed, I believe, is support from the state board to be more proactive, ensuring practices use proper nomenclature. There's a lot of challenges as LVTs when we're grouped into the generalization of veterinary technician, or on occasion we're seeing veterinary nurse being used. It becomes discouraging for students enrolled in formal education to not only invest time and money to do so, but then further investment of licensure to be titled as an LVT when there's a lot of no distinction in multiple practices. And unless an individual's undergone that formal education according to how the board defines an LVT, they are a vet assistant, not a veterinary nurse, or even on occasion we see RVTs. We used to be RVTs in the state, we're not. RVTs or CVTs are titled as that in their state, but that is not an appropriate title in our state. In serving on this board and being on ICs, I've read numerous cases where investigators, when reviewing medical records or completing interviews with the parties involved, pose the question, was a veterinary technician LVT, when that individual in question is identified as a veterinary technician. By not properly identifying employees in practice and lumping them all under this title, I believe we're doing a disservice to the public. This board serves as we're creating a misconception of who the various non-veterinary employees in practice are. And then when we throw the term nurse out there and allow that, we create further misunderstanding to the public. The American Nurses Association currently has a pending lawsuit to the Federal Trade Commission regarding the Veterinary Nurse Initiative. The title of veterinary nurse is used in other countries, Canada, Europe, a lot of other countries outside the US, but it's not been used in the US. Some of you board members may remember, and before I got involved on the state level, it was proposed many years ago, and the state nursing board vehemently opposed it. I don't feel we need to encourage the use of it by ignoring it when it's used in practice, at least here in Texas, where we have the jurisdiction as a board to educate otherwise. But I would like everyone to know, I've worked with many lay trained employees in practice. I've been the only credentialed technician in the practices I've served in. I'm not taking away the value of those. They're incredible. They contribute a lot to the practice. All well-trained employees can contribute to the daily operations of the practice, and in doing so benefit the vets, the clients, and patients we serve. But moving forward, I would like to strongly recommend that the board and the investigators who review the cases become more proactive in working to make the distinction between LVT, vet assistant, and CVA when dealing with practices, help educate. When we allow the public to think we're all the same regarding the knowledge, ability, and skills the public we're charged with protecting remains incorrectly informed. And I hear that in the interviews with both the owners in the ICs and the investigators talking, because they're just listed as that general. And I know it's challenging because it is a title no one wants to take away. There's been a lot of people called veterinary technicians for a long time, but by definition, they're not titled correctly. So it is an educational process. It is a step-by-step, but I think if when the investigators are getting this information, we can provide an opportunity to help those practices understand. I think we can better serve the public in the long run. Thank you.
I agree with you, and this has been my whole career, I've been hearing about this. What are the LVTs doing? What name are we calling them? They were RVTs, I think, when I first got out of school and
Yes.
the first couple of mine, but sounds like we need to be more clear, possibly as a board, and maybe create a rule of staff nomenclature. I don't know
Well, and there's
what it's
actually,
going for, or
it's not recognized by the AVMA or the accreditation body for our program, but there are a few programs across the US that are calling their programs veterinary nursing programs. They're still graduating with an Associate of Applied Science and Veterinary Technology. I think a lot of the fervor is backing off, but I think as a state board, we at least can be proactive in our state. You know, my first mentor was a lay trained person. They weren't a credentialed technician, and they were extremely good at what they do. But there is a set of skills and knowledge and abilities that on some level differentiate.
absolutely. I agree.
And I
So
know not
really-
everybody can hire an LVT, and I'm not disrespecting those practices. There's really good lay trained employees out there that you can put up against some of the credentialed ones. But you know, maybe a rule would be something that might need to be considered.
Thank you.
Is there a possibility somewhere in our rules that we can add that nomenclature to where a veterinarian is responsible if someone in his practice he is portraying as an LVT or an animal, technician that is not, to create a penalty if that happens?
Sorry, I don't, sorry, I missed part of that, I think. What is it that you're asking, Randy?
Yeah, I was wondering if there was somewhere in the rules that we could incorporate some kind of statement that says if a veterinarian is labeling someone as a veterinary technician or animal technician using that nomenclature without them having degree, there could be a penalty associated with that. Like on his website, if they just have animal or technicians or whatever listed, that we could get it across to them that they shouldn't be doing that.
Well, I don't believe there's a current rule, so the first thing would be to make a rule, but then the second thing would be to go out and educate everyone on it before we actually take any type of action. And that's been our compliance over, punishment has been most of our goal, especially with
Right.
things like
Yeah,
that.
and I would agree it needs to not be punitive.
Yeah.
Start, but at least,
Start trying to slowly make a change. Yeah.
Yes, baby
Yeah.
steps.
I totally identify with that. A few years ago, the AVMA fought somebody that was labeling their workers veterinarians at a dog store. And we all thought we were going to have heart attacks before the end of the week. So I totally agree. I understand.
So are we differentiating the term veterinary technician from licensed veterinary technician? Is that what we're saying here?
I think we need to recognize licensed veterinary technicians. So
And so you can't call anybody else a veterinary technician unless they're licensed? Is that what we're saying?
well, no, what we're saying is we'd like to maybe draft up a rule to consider doing that. Yes.
So the current statute says it defines licensed veterinary assistant pretty clearly, or a licensed veterinary technician pretty clearly. And then it basically says, if you're not an LVT, you're a veterinary assistant. That's what the current statute lays out. And so let us do some analysis on this one and get back to you on what we can do, because I think the statute may have us pretty well laid out, but let staff do an analysis on this and come back to you with a.
And I know it is an extremely challenging conversation to those employees that are being called that. I don't want them to look at it as a step down if their title has to change, but just to have a distinction, it's very challenging to see as an instructor now in a program. They get out and they go, well, they all call us technicians, and nobody knows the difference. And
What would we call those that have been through the vet assistant certification?
They're
They're
CVAs,
CVA.
certified vet assistants.
Yeah,
CVA, okay,
yeah.
They're
And
labeled
that's on the
as
rule.
deputy.
I mean, that's in the statutes.
okay. I'm good with that. It's gonna be a hard thing to change.
I know, and it's gonna be a process. I mean, my title's changed 4 times in 40 years. I'm old, you know, but I'm still, you know, I've always been credentialed in some format, but yeah, it's challenging. It's not unique to this state.
Yeah.
I just think we can have a voice in this state.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 8, discussion regarding CE hours for case reviewers. Kreiner.
Yeah, so I understand we're trying to use more outside case reviewers. And I know we limited the hours that we get as board members to 2 hours. And the cases generally take, you know, more than 2 hours to read through. So I'm not necessarily saying, because we elect to serve on the board, I'm not saying that we should get more hours, but if we're going to use outside case reviewers, you know, how are we compensating them? Are we paying them? Are they volunteering 10 hours of their lives reading a case? And if they are, shouldn't we at least give them 2 hours per case that they read, up to, you know, 10 or 12 hours? Because the amount of information, the amount of investigating, the amount of learning that you do on cases that you aren't familiar with is I feel pretty significant, and in and of itself is educational for them, which is what we're doing, right? We're trying to get better educated. So I just wanted to put out there that I thought if we're using outside case reviewers, we need to offer them more than just 2 CE hours. I'm not sure if we were offering them hours or not before, but if we aren't, we should. And if we are, we should offer them more.
Honestly, very recently is the only time that I'm aware that we've used non-board members to do case reviews, besides specialty reviewers for specialty cases. And I believe we have a discretionary fund that we have had to use to compensate them. We're just working on ways to try to get through the caseload. So we've reached out to some people who are practitioners who are willing to help with this, and knew that the only reward was 2 hours of CE. I don't think it should be a majority of the 17 hours of CE that are required. I don't think it should be different for outside reviewers than internal us reviewers. So I'm open to discussing a little bit more CE hours. Ultimately, my ultimate goal, and I've talked to multiple people about this, is to be able to compensate them. And we'd have to ask for that in our next budget, which is 2 years away. So, well, we don't, it's, you know, decided 2 years from now, but we can present it starting next year, I believe. But, you know, there's lots of things that our agency also needs money for. We need more investigators. Our whole world pretty much is complaints and getting through them. So, gosh forbid a crisis happen and we'll be even more behind. So the struggle is real. I don't know what else we can do at this point, but you know, if we certainly want to offer more CE hours, I think anyone would appreciate having that.
I agree
I
with
didn't
Dr.
know that.
Reiner that it's going to be tough though for us to offer financial, you know, stuff for doing those, but we could certainly offer like 8 hours of continuing education to make it worth their while. As Dr. White and I and Kreiner and all of you guys know, it takes a lot to go through these medical records, and it's certainly a learning experience, and it's pretty easy payout as far as getting a good quality work by practitioners without costing us money, just continuing education hours.
Yeah, I didn't know that we got CEs for doing this. And if we do, how is it documented?
We approved it, I think, last year or the year before. I can't remember. You were still part of the board then, Dr. White.
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Well,
So do
I'll send you your certificate right now. No,
all right.
I don't
Yes.
have an official certificate.
But, and I'm not a reviewer, obviously, I'm not a veterinarian, but even though it's not a monetary compensation, you can get free CEs. There's some potential monetary compensation. If you get more CEs, you're not having to pay for those CEs. I mean, you are in your time and your labor, but you're not financially putting out expenditure.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Dr. Quillen, I'd like to move, we offer 8 hours maximum continuing education for case reviews.
Per year, 8 hours per year.
Per year.
Yes, ma'am.
So before we second that, my question would be, would that be an 8-hour total, like because they had one case, or would it be 2 hours per case? And so a maximum of 4 cases?
Yeah, I agree. I think we'd have to limit that. You can't just say 8 hours for one case, although it may take 8 hours sometimes, but.
Right. So I'm thinking 2 hours per case read. Would that be fair?
With a maximum though, I mean,
With
you
a maximum of 8
hundreds
hours.
of cases a year, so you're gonna be set
Yeah.
for life. You don't ever have to go to CE again. No.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I think
would
they
like to
could-
offer my motion to include that verbiage if I could. 2 hours per case for a maximum of 8 per year.
I'll second.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, what do I say? Okay, sorry, I got caught up in talking. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion approved. Thank you. Our reviewers will be happy to hear that. I definitely agree. It's hard work. Thank you, Dr. Kerner.
Sorry, Dr. Quillen, that goes on ICs as well, I'm sure, right? You guys are getting those for ICs, or does that need to be labeled in there?
Are we getting any credit? I don't think we get any credit for that, Dr. Skaggs.
Oh, man. How can we
Well-
change that at this point?
I don't know.
You get bona fide high fives.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that does need to include ICs because certainly that's a step above, in my opinion. So,
Technically, we are reviewing cases when they come to us, so
Okay.
I guess
Yeah.
theoretically, Brittany, what do you think?
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know that we were getting 2 hours, that we had agreed to 2 hours for board members for reading cases, for everything that we do, we were getting 2 hours. So
Okay.
so real quick, before we finish this out, are we going to reapply that for board members as well to up to a max of 8 hours? Or just 2 hours for us because we volunteered to be?
No, the
here?
rule is for anyone who reviews medical cases, period. And that's
Okay.
pretty much all of us, because in
Okay.
IT, we review medical cases. So I don't think we need a change specifically for IC because we're reviewing the case after you guys review the case. We just can't do it both times.
Right.
Have comments on that?
And I will say, this is not in rule, this is just an internal policy, so we don't necessarily have to go through,
Oh, okay.
formal process. So
Okay.
Good.
you can just move forward knowing that that's the board's intent and honor those.
Awesome.
Yay. So this
That's
starts
all right.
immediately.
Effective now. Lynn, you don't have to go to CE this weekend. No, I'm kidding.
True, but I'm going to have fun.
Good. You should. Thank you for that, Lynn. That was a nice thing to do. Okay, so I think moving on to item number 9, consideration and approval of agreed orders.
Okay. And I currently have to pull and discuss an executive session, CP 18335. Are there any other cases from this category?
Brittany, that was my pulled case. I'd like to reconsider that after speaking with Mike. I think that has been rectified, so not sure we need to discuss that. No one else has called it.
Okay. All right. If there are any other cases to be discussed from agenda item 9. Okay. All right.
A motion to approve.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Item number 10, consideration and approval of cases recommended for dismissal by IC.
So from this agenda item, I have CP 19181, CP 19288, CP 19291, CP 19294, and CP 20087.
So can I have a motion to approve the others?
Motion to approve the other cases.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 11, consideration and approval of cases recommended for
Hold up for a second. Hold up. I'm sorry, I'm on mute.
Did I mess up? Okay, where are you at?
I was talking, but I was only talking to myself. I have some that I need to pull from IC dismissals
That weren't listed?
that were not listed. Yes, I kept talking, but y'all were ignoring me.
Well, you need to keep unmute. What are you doing in there that you have to mute yourself all the time?
So am I too late to list mine?
Brittany,
Let's see, we have voted.
are they not any of the ones we pulled? And did you
Can I
not?
move to reconsider the
We'll
vote?
have to reconsider the vote and then.
Okay, I move to reconsider the vote.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm sorry. But so CP 19260, CP 19272, CP 19276, which also has companions of 254 and 277, CP 19339, CP 20031, CP 20086, CP 2120.
I'm sorry,
And-
Dr. White, can you repeat that last number? I missed it.
CP 20120,
120, okay.
and then CP 21042.
There isn't a 21042 in this list.
Dr. White, are these all from IC dismissal?
Oh, maybe I've got it in the wrong category.
Okay.
It could be.
And in the future, let's all try to submit them to Brittany ahead of time so we can avoid this and have her pull them all at once. Okay, so reconsidering approval of cases recommended for dismissal by IC except for the pulled cases. Can I have a
Move.
motion? Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, item 11, consideration and approval of cases recommended for dismissal from medical review.
The cases I have to pull from this list are CP 20164 and CP 20188.
I also need to recuse myself from one of those. We get to that later.
Absolutely, yes. We can.
Did you have one from this one, Dr. White? You said a CP one before that you wanted to pull, or was it on number 12?
I don't remember where it was from. It's not in my order, so I'll forget that one.
He said CP 204-112,
You said what? CP?
CP 204-12.
Okay, that's there. We can pull that on this round. Anyone else have any pulls for agenda item number 11? Okay, I'll entertain a motion, please.
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And agenda item 12, consideration and approval of cases recommended for dismissal by staff.
And to pull from this agenda item, I have CP 21282. And then I believe Dr. White. Let's see that. Were there any other cases from this section?
Don't I need to recuse myself from one?
From yourself?
Oh,
Do we
no.
all have, how do we all recuse? We all have to.
Again, we cannot identify complainants of dismissed cases in open meeting, so we need
Okay.
to just make sure
We'll
we're
discuss. Yep.
treading carefully there.
Okay. All in favor of moving forward with 12 besides I heard one poll. Any other polls? Okay. All in favor, can I have a motion, please?
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 13, consideration approval of cease and desist letters.
I received no polls for this section.
Can I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. 14, citizen comments. I believe we have one, at least.
One.
It'll take just a little while to let the broadcast catch up to us in real time and then get
No
them.
problem.
So if you want to take a break for 5 minutes or so.
Okay. Anyone needs to take a break, I guess just mute and turn your camera off and run away for a minute.
All right, Dr. Quillivan, we, looks like we have a public comment person waiting. So as soon as everybody's back, we're good to go.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Hey Keith, how fired up you about your Longhorns joining the SEC?
Well, they're gonna get back with A&M.
Yeah, it's not good for us probably, but
Yeah, I'm not real happy about my alma mater, the University of Houston, and how that would affect them, although they weren't in the Big 12, but I don't like it for the smaller schools, really.
yeah, I know Baylor's going to take a hit. My daughter was there before she went to Ohio State, but I wonder if they'll join the rest of those Big 12 will join the Houston League.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe.
It's crazy. Crazy how it all turns out.
Oklahoma State's not real happy.
No, not. None of them should be happy.
Yeah.
There came out some findings, and don't quote me on numbers, but the direct effect to Lubbock and Texas Tech is over like $125 million in sales tax revenue a year.
Oh man.
I mean, so there was a real interesting legislative discussion yesterday too on it, but
I bet.
the Red Raiders are hyped up on it.
Oh, yeah.
And Dr. Quillivan, you have enough to start again if you want, or we can continue to wait. It's your call.
That's fine. We can begin.
All right, Brittany, are you ready? All right, Ms. Ware is coming in to join us.
Okay. Ms. Ware, you are on mute and we are ready for your comment whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's been an interesting board meeting with far too much to cover in my public comments, so I'm only going to touch on a couple of points that I prepared beforehand. For years, the Veterinary Board's licensee lookup tool has not accurately reflected disciplinary action for hundreds, if not thousands, of licensees. In 2016, the Sunset Commission directed—
Ms. Ware, you are on mute and we are ready for your comment. Sorry, I'm delayed. That's a delay. Sorry, go ahead.
It's been an interesting board meeting with far too much to cover in my public comments, so I'm only going to touch on a couple of points that I prepared beforehand. For years, the Veterinary Board's licensee lookup tool has not accurately reflected disciplinary action for hundreds, if not thousands, of licensees.
Ms. Ware, you're going to have to close your YouTube broadcast while you're on this one.
Cover in my public comments, so I'm only going to touch on a couple of points that I prepared beforehand. For years, the Veterinary Board's licensee lookup tool has not accurately reflected. I'm not certain what's going on.
Good morning, I'm Dr. Christopher Dunch. Let's begin.
Yes.
Hey, Doctor, I heard you came across some of—
John, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. It was your YouTube broadcast was bleeding over to your Zoom one, but as long as that one's closed, you're good to go now.
Okay, so why don't I start over
Sure.
again, if you all don't mind? I
That's
apologize. So as I mentioned, it's been an interesting meeting. There's a lot that I could possibly cover, but I will touch on only a few points that I prepared beforehand. For years, the Veterinary Board's licensee lookup tool has not accurately reflected disciplinary action for hundreds, if not thousands of licensees. In 2016, the Sunset Commission directed the board to fix it. 5 years later, little progress has been made, with the latest excuses being the vendor and the pandemic. Of course, the board considers itself beyond reproach. The crazy thing is, board staff uploaded some 200 board orders in less than 24 hours in 2018, while caught red-handed during an OAG open government investigation. So they are absolutely capable, but they deliberately withhold this information from public view to shield licensees from scrutiny. During the past few months, the interface began to look a bit different. The executive director's update today suggested licensee applications and renewals are being prioritized over the accuracy of their public-facing profiles. In fact, the licensee lookup tool is not even mentioned. Those of us who follow the board closely recognize that the tool still fails to reflect disciplinary action for a large proportion of licensees who have board orders. I have repeatedly asked board leadership, if you can call it that, when the licensee lookup tool will be rectified. Initially, I was provided timelines that were continually missed. Lately, my inquiries have been ignored altogether, a patent violation of the Texas Public Information Act. Just before this meeting, I finally got a response to the series of emails that I first initiated 2 months ago. My concerns were exacerbated by a recent situation in which a licensee's profile said none under disciplinary action when it should have said yes. Not until new criminal charges were lodged by law enforcement, the story appeared in the press, and the failure of the licensee lookup tool was brought to the board's attention again, did the licensee's profile change to reflect past disciplinary action. In other words, Texans who rely on the board's licensee lookup tool are misled and can unwittingly put their animals in harm's way. Another concern is the complaint dismissal rate this meeting, a whopping 95%, which I believe is a record. The Veterinary Board's website states the board and its staff are committed to excellence in their service to the public and the veterinary profession. The board's first priority is to protect the public. Yet paradoxically, the board continues to fail the public and enable violative veterinarians by hiding disciplinary action through a faulty licensee lookup tool, and now by not issuing disciplinary action in the first place. To quote a recent news piece regarding an expose of the Texas Medical Board, which, like the Texas Veterinary Board, has contributed to the harms and deaths of many, it, quote, in any case functions less like a supervisory agency and more like a guild determined to protect doctors from oversight or consequences, end quote. Indeed, what a shame for Texans who are often unaware until their animals suffer at the hands of violative veterinarians the board has protected from oversight or consequences. I will close by thanking not the board, but the advocates who have addressed these issues in various forms for so long. You know who you are. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't think we have any other citizen comments. Moving on to item 15, discussion and possible agenda items and dates for future board meetings. We already have our next board meeting slated, correct? September or October?
Is that October 28th?
October 28th.
So we have it. I was caught up in the mute. Yes, October 28th is what we have now.
For like 9 or 10 in the morning?
Yes, let's do morning, 9 a.m.
Is this a point too where we can bring up potential items for discussion?
Yes. Yes, possible new agenda items, right?
Yeah. It might not be a bad idea for us to hear a little bit of updates on the licensing lookup tool, kind of see what's going on with that and kind of fill us in.
Okay. Anything else currently on anyone's mind to add to?
Oh, yeah, why not? And by that time, it may already be taken care of. I'm interested in the progression of all of our online services, not just applications and license renewal, but anything else where you have to download information and send in a check. Are we? What's the time frame, or what do you anticipate the time frame being for getting all our services to be online? And by October, of course, I'm sure it'll be further along, but I think maybe having a discussion on that. And the only reason I bring it up was because I was looking at helping out a colleague and getting the letter of good standing. And turns out you have to download the application and send in a check. And I was like, okay, we're using credit cards for everything else. And is that part of the system? So I had a nice conversation with Wanda, and she said it's in process, but it's not there yet. So that could be something we can add into the discussion of other things that we're going to make life more 21st century ready.
Okay. Anything else currently on anyone else's minds right now? I'm sure we'll, of course, make a call for agenda items, hopefully a couple weeks before the meeting. Okay. Item number 16, we will be going into executive session. It is, according to my clocks, 3:13 p.m. At this time, the board will go into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 551071, Government Code Section 551074, and Occupations Code Section 801407.
All right, we're just, give us a second here to make sure that the delay is caught up, and then we'll be good to go.
Tricia's inviting us to a different room. Do we go there? Yep.
Yes, please.
Okay, so FYI, everyone's on mute because we got muted when we came back in, but it is 4:17 PM. And the board is now back in open session. No action was taken in closed session.
All right, and now we will start the votes on the cases that were pulled for discussion in executive session. We can start with the cases pulled in agenda item 10. The first case there is CP 19181.
Are we going to do these individually or as a group?
We'll do them individually.
I need motions and seconds every time, and then we vote. Can I have a motion, please? Anyone, please?
Move to dismiss or move to approve?
Yes, move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any opposed?
No.
Okay.
Yes,
The next case up for consideration from agenda item 10 is CP 19260.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
The next case for consideration under agenda item 10 is CP 19272.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay. Next up is CP 19276.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This is like this widget machine that's like the same thing over and over. Okay,
The next case is CP 19288.
Move.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you.
The next case is CP 19291.
Move.
Second.
Jumped in there, didn't you? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The next case up for consideration is CP 19294.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
No.
opposed?
No.
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 Wait, how many was that?
Okay,
Two.
so
Two.
Yeah, we're gonna need hands on the nose.
How
on
many
that one.
opposed?
I'm a no.
Hands.
are there more than two no's?
There's two.
No, there's three.
Three.
There's three.
Okay, right now we have White, Dr. Skaggs, Miss
And Miss
Allen, is
Correct.
no.
Correct.
Okay,
Right. The next case up for consideration is CP 19339.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Next up is CP 20031.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Next up is CP 20086.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Then we have CP 20087.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thank you.
All right. Then we have CP 20120.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, that concludes the cases pulled from agenda item 10. We'll start with the cases pulled from agenda item 11. The first case we have is CP 20164.
I can't do it.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Next up in agenda item 11 is CP 20188.
Move.
Move.
Oh,
Second.
no, I need a second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Next up is CP 20412.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Last case in agenda item 11 is CP 21042.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Moving on to agenda item number 12, staff dismissals. The case up for discussion is CP 21282.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. I think we are on to the infamous item 18. It is 4:24 PM and this meeting is adjourned.
You need a motion for that?
Need a motion on that.
I move. Move.
Thank you, Lynn.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
You can stay, Skaggs.
Got nothing to do.
You had nothing else better to do than say no.
Ah,
Well, I
thank you
appreciate
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Aye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.